Because you have to realize hitting another unit means that you have to constantly shoot someone else. Like this. Like what do you want me to do? Unless I do this. The optimal play is this. Because you don't want to like not shoot, right? Am I misunderstanding the optimal gameplay on this? Because you will get full stacks the moment you remove that. So you have to hit the rapture and then you have to hit another rapture. Yeah, you have to constantly hit the thief card. And the thing is, like, you're losing DPS the moment like you're shooting another, you're not shooting a different rapture. Am I misunderstanding this? Because like, okay, if I'm dragging out, right? That means I'm losing DPS because there's a period in time where I'm not shooting, because that's how ARs work. I mean, she's doing better than my maid previously, to be fair, but then yeah, these are both like no OLs, right? So if you guys don't have a lot of units invested and overloaded, she might perform for Elysion for us. Yeah, that's not really a high bar. But yeah, in solo raid context, I could see her being used as like a sort of half support, sort of half DPS as a water advantage. I cannot see using her off element though. That's the only thing I could say, because I feel like there's other better buffers off element. And again, if we're not using her for DPS, then what's the point? She's gonna fit that DPS on primarily water advantage. For other off element advantage, I mean, let's take a look at this one for example. I feel like if there's core, the fire team would be relevant. And if there's no core or like not as much effective advantage on the core, look what everyone else used. They used the electric team. The Pierce team with Snow White worked because like the parts are active at specific times. So, and then there's core that is visible to take advantage of Mary's Pierce buff. So it managed to actually take advantage of it relatively. And actually some of them actually used like Modernia instead of Maxwell also. Or yeah, basically. So it is actually possible / useful Pierce team. And I'm trying to think if I'm gonna use Phantom in terms of solo raid. It's hard to think about it on a neutral solo raid. I have a hard time, even if there's mobs in it. Partly because like the gameplay is already bad, right? Like you have to shoot at different enemies. And another thing is like because you want to focus on the boss as much as possible, and using her makes you not shoot on the boss for a period of time. In fact, for Emilia, one of the better ways to take advantage, fight the boss, is to keep shooting on Emilia and wait until the mobs just like pass by the boss, and you would hit the mobs while you're shooting the Emilia. So like the best way to deal with the mobs and Emilia is to ignore them and wait until they get close to where you're shooting instead. Like even in that situation, you're not really like intentionally targeting the mobs. So yeah, my overall thoughts is, if I have to be honest, is I can't neutral. I have a hard time like using her on solo raid. Elysion, it seems like she is performing, but it's not a high bar to begin with. I mean, the good thing about it is she is a standalone unit. I mean, I could see her being used in the water advantage solo raid. But if you are ever gonna plan on using her in water advantage solo raid, I would just wait until the actual solo raid that's water advantage, and wait for the other cookers to cook that. And then if they did see that Phantom is useful, then maybe that's when it's a good time to invest in Phantom if you want to be competitive in that. But even then, again, like it's hard to find a team for her. And if the boss has core, we would use the fire team instead as the team 5. I think right now the Pierce team is too strong, or / the Mari team specifically, because Mari's buff is just so good. Mari's buff is so good that like sometimes they would even not use Snow White. Actually, let me find that. Yeah, so in this one, the Mari team, technically there is Maxwell that's taking advantage of Mari's buff, but you have Quency and Modernia. So like in terms of Pierce buff that from Mari, only Maxwell's benefiting on it. The thing is, like, Mari provides attack damage buff also, which is good for Modernia, to be fair, still. That's why Mari is pretty useful. So yeah, again, I can't justify using Phantom right now on neutral unless the boss has like ridiculously high defense. Phantom feels like she runs to counter everything you want to do in Nikke. Focus fire on priority targets to neutralize them as fast as possible. Which is weird because Phantom has two conflicting skill effects. She has this skill too, where you want to stack the Thief's Dagger. And technically you can stack the Thief's Dagger with Bunny Alice, right? But it will stack the Thief's Dagger and it will pop whoever has the calling card, and it will deal this additional attack damage. And then there's this one where she wants to keep shooting the enemy that has the calling card for additional attack damage. So there's like two conflicting skill effects, and maybe it's just more, oh, so this is like, at least she can work even if there's no mobs. And then if you want to have mobs, this is how she works, kind of the deal. So it's like she works, half of her efficient kit is like for single target, but then half of, I don't know if it's half really, but another portion of her kit is to shoot other units consistently rotating, right? It's a really finicky, weird setup. But I guess if we really want to boil it down, skill 1 is for bosses, skill 2 is for, I mean, technically it's for both PvE mobbing, and also technically it is for her additional attacks though. But like if we're gonna use her, I guess if we plan to just use her for Elysion Tower, I think upgrading skill 2 is probably more than enough. And then skill 1 is more for bossing. And burst, I probably wouldn't upgrade it, considering the damage increase that we got was like barely much. I mean, okay, this is because also we couldn't stack up properly. Even with Harvester, we couldn't really get a proper stack up. But even then, I don't see it being like too much of a diff. So we don't have to increase the burst skill on her. I would probably go in a priority of skill 2 to skill 1 and then burst final. I mean, to be fair, you could argue that skill 1 is also as evenly priority because of the attack damage buff. So like, I guess you can't really go wrong with skill 1 also. They should be roughly similar priority, and I would just put the edge a little bit on skill 2, just a little bit. But even then, I would say skill 1 and skill 2 are roughly similarly high priority. Oh yeah, it's also the hit rate, because this hit rate will help her hit the mobs from far away for campaign, right? Like in campaign, when the mobs are far away, this hit rate does kind of help up. So if you really feel like you really want to competitively do Elysion Tower now, specifically now, then I think it is not bad to upgrade her, assuming you haven't invested on Guillotine. If you've invested in Guillotine and Maid previously, I mean, I probably wouldn't, because like, I'm gonna question you, how much copy have you have on Phantom, and then like, did you overload Guillotine already is another question. Basically, again, there's like the CP offset, right? The combat power offset. So if you have like a relatively good Maid privity and Guillotine already, I don't see it. And also, here's another thing, and I guess this is just a food for thought for some of you. If you guys are like way ahead of your competition on your tower in your ranking. Because let's be real here, if you're trying to be competitive on the Elysion tower, that's really primarily the reason. If you're too far away from it, and typically like the number 2, you have like a level advantage of them, right? Like I'm like level 306. This guy's like 367, and it doesn't show here, but Cheeks is 421. There's like a 60 level gap difference on that. I mean, I'll be real with you. A lot of people have just pushed the tower just via levels. Just level gap it. So personally, yes, she will perform in tower, but like, would you really invest in that? Yeah, just blue digits it, especially with anniversary pilgrim coming up. Yeah, and again, from what it seems like, it seems like she's a mini Ludmilla. Like in terms of support capability, she's slightly, I feel like I would put a higher priority with Ludmilla than her. And in terms of DPS capability, I mean, in a single target boss fight, I mean, my Ludmilla does come out a little bit ahead. This is with even investments. By the way, in this image, Quency was not bursting here. And then if Quency was bursting and Phantom was bursting, and I believe my Phantom and Ludmilla are evenly invested. So Ludmilla has 2 ammo, 1 LA, 1 attack. And my Phantom has 1 attack, 1 ammo, 40% only though. So it's kind of low value ammo. But she has 38% LA. Yeah, plus or minus like 38% LA. So she actually has slightly higher elemental advantage than Ludmilla. 777, and my Ludmilla is 1047. So yeah, she's like a inferior Ludmilla with a yeah. So that's like my thoughts on her for now. And I can't really think of like where to use her other than Elysion Tower. And maybe solo raid, assuming that you have good elemental rolls on overloads. Specifically, solo raid water advantage. I actually have a hard time thinking of using her on solo raid neutral unless the boss has ridiculously high defense. That's the only exception that I could think of. But even then, again, so far, I believe almost all solo raid have been consistently in the 30k roughly defense, I think. What Phantom provided for us in solo raid to the specific DPS that had, I guess, plus 100% attack is a 5% damage increase to this particular DPS. If we only had, I don't know, maybe like a 50% attack unit, then it would be from 150k attack, it will go from 120k to 130k, an 8% damage increase. So naturally, the less attack multipliers that a unit has, the more Phantom's defense down mean in a solo raid situation. TLDR, I think for a lot of you can probably skip. And the thing is, like, she's gonna be available in the wish list, and I don't see her as like being a high priority. She can be used in Elysion from what it seems like so far, assuming that you don't have any other units that are invested. But if you have, like, say, if you invested in Guillotine already, right? Yeah, and then you have like a high copy of Guillotine or something, and then you have like Maid Privity also if you're doing the shotgun team. I just personally, I just find it difficult to invest in another unit. That's just my perspective. But I mean, on an even investments, it looks like she can perform on Elysion Tower. And that doesn't say much.